Hello, this is Ruben Dua from Dubb's Online Summit Action. And in this installment, we are going to be talking with Jay Abbasi about your brain on mindfulness. One of the things that we're going to talk about specifically is mindfulness within sales and leadership. Jay, if you could start with a short bio, and love to get into these slides.
Yeah, sure, Ruben. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. A little bit about me. Some years ago, I had some challenges in my life where I had to figure out how do I get out of a rut that I was in terms of being overworked, being burnt out, and dealing with some personal loss with my family. I lost my father suddenly, and it took me down this road of self-discovery and trying to figure out how I can better myself and improve myself. And it led me down to this path of understanding what mindfulness can do for me and being able to manage through those difficult times. But what ended up resulting is that I found great benefits in how I can apply these tools to the work that I did. And I joined a company named Solar City, which was acquired by Tesla. And working at Tesla, I found my way climbing the ladder from being a salesperson to running a national training program for Tesla before leaving, starting a business. And now I offer coaching services to those who are in a similar spot that I was, looking to find joy in their work, a career that's fulfilling, and be able to do so without having to work themselves to death.
Very good. So, yeah, if you want to go ahead and take the lead on these slides.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we have here is an example of what happens to the mind with a practice of meditation. So there have been fMRI scans done on the human brain of meditators or people before they meditated and after they meditated. So what we see here in the first difference is an increase or decrease, I should say, in the gray matter in the amygdala. And it's fascinating to see how this alteration occurs only after a few weeks of practicing mindfulness meditation. So what is the amygdala and what does that even mean? So the amygdala is an area of the brain that's perceiving threats. So the amygdala has everything to do with what corresponds with fight or flight. So you've all been there where someone or something happened, or you were in a situation where you responded with anger, or you wanted to flee the situation, and you're now losing control over yourself because you're now in threat mode and you are not able to stay present, and also you're not able to respond effectively. So with that, your amygdala is firing off, and that's causing this issue. And what happens is the area of your brain that deals with executive functioning and cognitive functioning, that's the prefrontal cortex, is not involved anymore. That's why oftentimes when you're angry, you don't remember what you said. And imagine as a salesperson or as a leader trying to operate where these things are always happening. You don't have much control and you don't have much choice as to how you're going to respond to a situation. But with mindfulness meditation, and Ruben, you can go to the next bullet here, you're going to be able to see a decrease in gray matter in the amygdala. That's what the fMRI scans show. And the other aspect of this is a pathway gets created between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. So this is a fascinating aspect to what the science shows us. So as I was saying before, you are in fight or flight. Your prefrontal cortex is basically not functioning, meaning you no longer have the ability to choose how you respond. But after weeks of mindfulness meditation, a pathway begins to get created between that area of the brain, the more evolved area of the brain, and the amygdala. Meaning you can jump in and say, wait a minute, what's happening here? Literally, your brain can manage the situation differently. Think about this if you're a salesperson with handling an objection. Think about this as a leader where you received a notice from one of your employees that they didn't hit their numbers, or they're not able to make an important sales call. And now you have to figure out how to solve it. You are able to jump in here and manage your own emotions and your own thinking. So this is a fascinating aspect. And if we go to the next bullet here, Ruben, what we're going to also see is that areas of the brain that have to do with empathy, with learning, and with memory are increased thanks to the practice of mindfulness meditation. And I can share a quick story with you, one that I think fascinates me. I had an incredible leader who I was working with in my coaching program where she was on anxiety medication. She was on antidepressants. She was dealing with this anxiety and this pressure and this burnout of her work as an entrepreneur, as someone who was doing her marketing, and she was also homeschooling her son. It was a great deal on her. And after weeks of working together, she no longer needed that medication. She was off the medication because mindfulness practices and meditation helped her to be able to manage through those anxieties, to be able to have more regulation of her emotions. So, in the aspects here of course, empathy and of learning, all of us can benefit from getting to being better learners and being more empathetic, especially as leaders. We can go to the next slide, Ruben. So the other way to look at this, it's a fascinating way to understand the brain, is that we have something called the default mode network and the task positive network. And these two areas of the brain do not operate at the same time. So if we go to the next slide, Ruben, we're going to kind of explain the default mode network for you. So I want you to think about, times where you're maybe daydreaming, you're distracted, your focus is on the future, or you're ruminating about something that happened in the past. When that's happening, you're in default mode network. Now, this also means you are not present. You're not focusing your attention on the present moment. And while, of course, that has its benefits and its usefulness in certain areas of life, to be able to imagine, I mean, that's a great thing. But what's impacting us in ways that don't always serve us is that it distracts us from being present with people and with the tasks that we have at hand. Fascinating statistic that came from Harvard, a Harvard study years ago, was that 47% of the time we are distracted. 47% of the time we are not focused on the present moment. And what that also showed was that during that time, the people who were in the research were less happy when distracted. So we have correlation from this study that shows by being present, you are happier. And I think that's a logical conclusion that we can all make. But also, if you are focused at the task at hand, or you are 100% present with the person you're speaking with, you are a more effective salesperson. You are a more effective leader. So, Ruben, we can go to the next slide. What we have here is an area of the brain, the posterior cingulate cortex, I'm not great at pronouncing this, that gets highlighted when we are present. And so in the next slide, we're going to explain how the task positive network works. With this is very much correlated to what's often called being in a flow state. So when you're in the task positive network, the area of the brain that is focusing on the present moment, you're oftentimes doing work where it feels like time is flying and you're doing your best work. And it means that you're not getting distracted by thoughts of the future and thoughts of the past. So what we can imagine this having in terms of benefits is to be able to willingly be present. So in other words, it is what what studies on meditation have showed us is that we have greater access to the task positive network. The human mind is more wired to be in the task positive network when you are practicing meditation regularly. So if we go to the next slide here, Ruben, just to kind of highlight, what this actually means and how to actually apply this to your life, because that's ultimately what we're asking, right? How do we apply this? What can we do? Well, the benefits that you get include increased focus, improved productivity, increased creativity, better sleep, better regulation of your emotions, less depression, less stress, less anxiety, being a better performer, being able to manage focusing on getting your results without feeling like at the end of the day, you're drained and you just need to crash and binge on Netflix, right? We're ultimately talking about greater fulfillment and greater happiness. Now, how you go about that is not to find time to meditate, I would encourage you not to think of it this way. You don't find time to brush your teeth. You don't find time to go to sleep at night. You make time to meditate, to make time to brush your teeth. You make time to go to sleep. And in the same way, you make time to meditate every day. And Ruben, what I'd also say is we should incorporate this beyond just sitting for 10 minutes, 20 minutes a day in the morning. Throughout the day, find opportunities to bring yourself to the present moment. Between meetings, sit there, take a breath. Notice your breathing. Notice your body in the chair that you're sitting in. Notice any of the emotions that are there. It takes only 2-3 minutes, 5 minutes at most. You can do this between meetings to keep wiring your brain to be in that task positive network. I don't hear you, Ruben.
Such a fascinating topic. I wanted to share a quick story on how this is so relevant and how in a very endearing way this was made very obvious to me. You know, I have a martial arts coach and also a meditation coach, and it's the same person. And you know, one time he said, "Hey, would you like to join me for a morning meditation at 8:30 in the morning? It's going to be nice. I think it'll be good for you." And I said, "Oh, I'm too busy right now. I don't have the time to do that. I'm sorry. You know, we'll have to take a rain check on that." And then he looked at me and he said, "Well, that's why you need to meditate." And I think the story that he was trying to convey is that, you know, if I'm not making meditation part of my daily ritual, if I'm not able to manage my life and to have control over my life, where I'm being proactive instead of reactive and present, then I might be missing out on opportunities. And I think that same response can be applied to so many things. I don't have time to meditate. I don't know how to meditate. Meditation is not a priority. There's too many distractions. You know, for every reason, every objection that you might have on practicing mindfulness, practicing your meditation is probably going to be the cure for that.
It's so true. It's so true. And I think oftentimes, Ruben, you know, there's misconceptions as to what it takes and how hard it is, or whatever. I've talked to so many people, Ruben, that said, "Well, I just can't meditate." And, you know, whenever I hear that, my response is oftentimes like, "Well, that's like saying you can't exercise." You know, you can exercise. You just have to go to the gym and do it. And it may be painful the first time if you've never done it before, right? You might get sore after going to the gym and lifting weights the first time if you've never done it before. In the same way, yeah, you might be taken away by your thoughts and it might feel like it's a challenge. But the fact that you're doing it, that in itself is where the benefit comes. Because every time, I use this analogy all the time with the gym analogy, which is to say, every time your attention goes somewhere and you bring it back to an anchor like your breath, it's basically like you're doing a bicep curl for your brain. And you can do that for 20 minutes in the morning or 10 minutes in the morning, or you can do that throughout the day. And you're just sitting there doing bicep curls between meetings.
Right. I think a lot about empathy. You mentioned empathy. And I think that the amazing connection that people might make or have to empathy, hopefully, is this idea of self-awareness. You know, understanding thyself. It's impossible to understand others if we can't understand ourselves. It's impossible to connect to other people's struggles, trials, and tribulations if we can't connect to ours, either something similar or unsimilar. If we don't know ourselves, it's difficult to evolve. So my question for you is, how can we do a better job to become more self-aware, to understand where trauma exists, where ego exists, where impatience exists, where we potentially lack the ability to be empathetic to another person and lack that connection opportunity as a result?
Yeah, it's a great question. What comes to mind first is how you approach yourself and the attitude that you take towards being self-aware is incredibly important. So I liked how you described, if I were to try and understand another person, but I'm going from the frame of judgment or trying to see how I compare myself to that person, you can't really understand them too well because you've already judged them. This applies to yourself as well.
Mm.
You cannot go into your own thinking and your own patterns with the frame of judgment, of criticism, and of trying to compare yourself to others. It's going to end poorly. They've done meditation studies, by the way, Ruben, where it did not get great benefits for the person because they did not practice self-compassion.
Mm.
So self-compassion is an important component. And I always encourage my clients to approach themselves with two important attitudes. One is self-compassion, and the other is a playful curiosity or a gentle curiosity. Be curious. Think about self-awareness as I'm not trying to fix myself, and I'm not trying to say I'm bad or I'm wrong. It's I'm curious as to how I think and how I feel and how I respond. I'm curious, and I'm also going to really make sure that I approach myself and love myself the way I would my best friend in the world.
Mm. Fascinating. I went through the process of being certified in transcendental meditation a very long time ago, and going through a specific program in meditation is obviously a very personal choice. Some people should invest into it. Some people don't feel comfortable investing into it. Everyone has a different path here. So I wouldn't make any recommendations as to what type people should pursue, but I do believe in this idea of people needing coaches if they're ready to invest in themselves. So Bob Roth has this great talk on YouTube about transcendental meditation. And he makes a statement about meditation in general, which is whether you believe it will work or you believe it will not work, will not change the effect of it. So if I don't believe that exercise is going to make me healthier and I exercise 3 times a week, my vibe might be a little bit off. My constitution might be a little bit broken, but I still might realize the benefits, whatever those may be, mentally and physically. The same, according to many sources, including Bob Roth, who has very, very interesting background in quantum physics and meditation and just mindfulness as a scholar. His philosophy of not believing in it actually doesn't affect the outcome of it, I think is fascinating. And the reason why I think that's the case is because of the science that you presented to us. And I think that by unpacking some of the science in the way that you did, it allows us to look at this in a very objective way. And I wanted to ask you, what are some additional resources that people can pursue, that people can consume, potentially on your website or through your programs, where they can actually make that choice to become more self-aware and to get educated in this? Because this is not something that we just stumble upon in life. We need direction from people like yourself, Jay. So if you could guide us a little bit on additional resources, that would be great.
Absolutely, Ruben. So my website, jayabbasi.me, we have a free guided program that's available right on the website that will introduce you to mindfulness. And we break down what you saw today, the neuroscience, as well as some of the misconceptions and demystifying all of this. And we also get into some specific techniques that you can be introduced to it if you've never done it before, or if you have and still want to look at different ways in which you can come to the present moment. Because that's ultimately what we're talking about here, how to come to the present moment. So you have right there on my website in the top right corner, there is that orange button to take you to the free guided program. Or of course, another way that you can always find me is through LinkedIn. And I post daily content. And oftentimes this is the topic that people want to learn more about. So you can find some great content there as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Jay. I did notice on your website that you have a piece on stress.
Yes.
And my understanding of stress is how we interpret conflict and how we express our frustration with that conflict. I would love to understand how you can teach us more about stress. How can we can become more aware of it, manage it, rechannel it into positive energy. I know you have some statistics on this as well.
Yeah, well, some of the statistics are pretty mind-blowing. What we see is that 87% of workers have said that they are not engaged at their work, and that a whopping 80% have gone to doctor's visits due to stress from work And over half of the employees, and this is all US studies, by the way, half of employees have said that they are mentally checked out. And so clearly this is a problem. And I also know of another statistic that said by the World Health Organization that mental health will be the biggest health crisis. I believe it's by 2030 is what they are anticipating. It will be the biggest health crisis in the world. So it's all about how we relate to stress. I think oftentimes people hear that word stress and assume it's negative. It's not always. I like to think of stress can be healthy. It can be healthy stress, because without stress, there's no growth. Ruben, you and I have been talking about the exercise analogy. If you were to go to the gym every day and you never stressed your body, you would never see physical growth. You wouldn't see yourself getting stronger. You would always remain the same. So growth or stress in a healthy way is important for growth. It's how we relate to it. So the relation that we have with the stress that we experience at work is oftentimes one that suggests we shouldn't be having this, or we want to avoid this. We don't want this. We want to get away from it. We resist it. And that resistance is what's causing us even more stress. And that's when it spirals out of control and could lead to burnout. So I'm not suggesting that you should full force always look for stress and keep trying to get stressed out. I am suggesting that you recognize stress as a demand that is on you. It's a demand just like a weight would be as a demand on your chest. But you should recognize at what point that stress is becoming too much, or what point those weights, right, are becoming where you can no longer lift them. And at that point, you need to set your boundaries. As an employee, or even outside of work, whatever it is, you need to set those boundaries and get clear on what is the demand that you are able to take on right now, what will stress you in a healthy way, and what has gone to a point where it is no longer something that you can take on. So if you can relate to your stress in a more effective way, that's, I think, priority number one in how you relate to it. And two, to be able to recognize when that demand is becoming too much and to set those clear boundaries. So that way you can still do effective work without getting to that place of burnout.
Now, speaking of stress, we would be remiss not to mention and not to kind of close out how a lot of this affects people in sales, which is definitely a stressful job, with air quotes, I would say that. How can we take a lot of what you've taught us with mindfulness, with self-awareness, with empathy, and apply that to us as sales folks, as sales leaders? Give us kind of a closeout on that.
Yeah. Well, there's one thing that you always have access to that can help to relieve your stress at any moment. And we're doing it thousands of times a day, and it's our breathing. And so I would encourage anybody who has sales calls, whether it's right now Zoom or it's in person, to bring your attention to your breath and also take deep breaths whenever you need to throughout the day. It's a simple little technique, right? One of my favorites is, breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 7, exhale for 8 slowly. Whenever that demand is starting to mount, right, as a salesperson. So that's one simple technique, but in a more macro level of how to approach sales, I would encourage you to understand that ultimately what causes us stress is the expectations that we've set about how things are going to go. And so it's, of course, healthy to intend on supporting all of your clients and being the best salesperson that you can be. The problem tends to be when we attach to the result of a client saying yes and things not going the way we intended. So I would tell you to take inventory of those expectations and have a healthy expectation that allows you to be the best salesperson that you can be, put forth your best intent, and do great work without attaching to the result, because the attachment to the result and it not going the way you planned is what will lead to a lot of those difficult emotions.
So good. And you have a LinkedIn Live
yes.
recurring event. Talk to me about this.
Yeah, it's kind of had its own growth naturally, which has been a lot of fun. So every Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern, we have a topic, and that topic will be a lot of what we talked about today. We often discuss, and in it, we get into conversations with the audience. It's fascinating. The comments that come in are what really create the conversation. So people come in, they will contribute to the live, and we have topics that range from how to be how to build your career effectively, how to be a great listener, how to be more, how to practice meditation more effectively, and how to bring it into your daily life. The topics range. And so, yes, it is a very fun broadcast that we're doing every Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern.
And I also see that you have a Facebook group, which is exciting. Love to see that community building. Talk to me about this. It seems like you have some great video content. We love video content at Dubb. Obviously, we're a video communication platform, so love to see that. Congratulations. Talk to me about the community aspects of your tribe.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the group is intended for anyone who is looking to aspire to create success professionally, to be able to, who has those ambitions to really make an impact on the world, but to do so in a way that doesn't sacrifice their own health and their own well-being. And so we engage in that community to be able to share some ideas and some tips on how you can maintain that throughout your daily life.
Amazing. Well, Jay, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you. And I will see you on LinkedIn.
Absolutely, Ruben. Likewise. Thanks so much, my friend.
Thanks.